Welcome into the CBS Sports Network, where we are going to be talking college basketball recruiting in the NBA draft for the next 60 minutes. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and I will be with you throughout the hour. Up first is a live commitment from one of the very best guards in high school basketball, Ikenna Alozie. This guy is a dynamic athlete. He's terrific on the defensive end of the floor. He creates tempo. You see his prospect profile there. One of the top 50 prospects in the national class, four-star, one of the top 10 point guards in his class. He's 6'2", 185 pounds, but he is absolutely ripped physically, and he gets it done on both ends of the floor. Someone who can really change the game. I think he's advanced defensively. He is dynamic in the open court. When he gets loose in transition, he has a rare ability to rise up and make momentum changing plays. But what has really allowed his game to go to the next level in the last year or two has been the progression of his skill set. He's gotten much more consistent with the ball in his hands. He's gradually learning to run a team. He's become a much more consistent shooter. He's had a variety of high major recruitment, but ultimately he trimmed his list to just these three finalists. And today he will be picking between Alabama, Grand Canyon, and Houston. Without further ado, we are going to go out to Dream City Christian, where we are joined by Ikenna Alozie. And as you can see, some friends and family. Ikenna, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. We're excited too. Now, before we get going, I got to ask you, you have got a whole crowd with you here today. Who are you surrounded by for this special moment?
Honestly, I have my coaches right here, and my school, the whole school actually is pretty much right here. So I'm pumped. It's a big day.
That is a big day. What a memory. This is awesome stuff. Before we get to the announcement, I want to ask you about what the last few years have been like for you, because first time I saw you play, I think you were playing out in New Jersey, and we have seen you be a staple on the circuit, not just this year, not just last year, but for multiple years. You've been recruited throughout the whole way. We've seen you had big performances at Basketball Without Borders. So as you look back at these last few years, all of which has brought you to this commitment day, what has this process been like for you?
It's been great. It's been a roller coaster of joy and, adversities, but, I keep on, facing it and, gradually growing from it, and just learning point at the same time. So I have all these guys for me, they stand by me every day, pushing me and, helping me go through difficulties and, things that I have to work on and things that I have to do. So yeah, it's been great.
All right. Now, you talked about the people who have pushed you and supported you. Before we get to the announcement, I know everybody wants to go nuts, but before we get to that point, I want to give you a chance to thank anyone who has helped you get to this point in your process.
Yeah, I want to start by thanking God for the process and for the protection here. I know I don't deserve any of it, but He still blesses me, guides me, and shows me every day that it's not my plan, but His plan. He continues opening doors for me, giving me strength, and through every lesson into something I could grow from. I just want to give Him all the glory. And I also want to thank my mom and my family, my siblings, for putting up with me my whole life. Thank you for providing for me. Obviously you couldn't, they don't get the chance to, obviously watch me right now, but hopefully the clip could be sent back to them. But, I just want to appreciate them and let them know that, I see everything and I appreciate it. And for my friends and family, coming up from back when I was back home in Nigeria, from RoPac to Detail Academy, to the Patches School, to the Rands, to Utah Prospect, and then now Dream City, it's been a whole lot of journey and a whole lot of people I've met, along the way, but I just want to extremely thank them and show them that they've not really just, encouraged me and helped me on the court, but off the court at the same time. So they've taught me to be a man, and I really appreciate the memories and things that we've done together. Yeah.
All right, Ikenna, that is extremely well said. And now the moment is at hand. You get to tell everybody, both in that room with you and watching on national television, where you are going to be playing your college basketball.
Yes, sir. So for the next year, today I'll be announcing that I'll be taking my next step in my journey to the University of Houston.
The crowd goes wild. He's a Cougar. headed to play for Kelvin Sampson at the University of Houston. Ikenna, congratulations. What was it about Houston and Coach Sampson that appealed to you? Everybody's making too much noise over there. You can't even hear me. They're all excited. Ikenna, what was it about Houston that made that the spot for you?
Honestly, on my visit, obviously they have a great fan base and everything. But when I went on my visit, it was, Coach Sampson kept it real. He didn't sugarcoat nothing. He let me know what it was going to be. And I understood and I knew that, oh my God, I've been, in this type of culture for a minute, being in Nigeria and that. But so me just going back to that place, he felt like home. And, that's what really stood out for me. The fact that he was, plain and simple about it and let me know, oh, this is what I'm about to come do. The plan they had for me was great.
All right, Ikenna. And my last question to you now, that is an enthusiastic fan base down there in Houston. They travel. The Coug family is out in full force. What would you tell those Cougar fans who are watching right now? What are they getting when Ikenna Alozie arrives in Houston?
They honestly, they getting a competitor, someone that do whatever to win, someone that coming to, push the pace for, bringing excitement to the whole fan base and everything. But at the same time, they're expecting a new legacy. Yeah.
All right. Well, Ikenna, there is only one thing left for you to do, and that's to go celebrate with your coaches, your teammates,
Absolutely.
and all your friends and family who are there with you to share this special day. And thank you so much for sharing it here with us, CBS Sports.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you, man.
All right.
Appreciate
that
you
is
having me.
Ikenna Alozie off the board to Houston in what is, I think, just an obvious fit for Kelvin Sampson, a program that is built on tenacity and toughness. They are getting one of the most athletic lead guards in the country, one of the best on-ball defenders in the country. And obviously that is a point of emphasis for the Cougars program. To help me break this down, going to welcome in 24/7 Sports Director of Basketball, Eric Bossi, into the show. And E-Boss, welcome in. As I said, I think this is a pretty obvious fit, but tell me your take on Ikenna Alozie to Houston.
No doubt it's an obvious fit. When you watch these Kelvin Sampson teams forever since Kelvin Sampson's been a coach, he values toughness. He values guys that can defend all over the floor, and he values guys that come in with a commitment to working hard, developing over time. I think they've proven that they can show a clear path towards getting better and turning yourself into potentially an NBA player. And that's what Ikenna sees. And you can follow the footsteps of maybe a guy like Jamal Shead in the past, who probably wasn't as highly known coming out of high school as Ikenna, but a very similar guy in terms of size, game. And they've turned him into a very valuable NBA player right now. And I think he can kind of go down that direction.
All right, so there's a clear lineage there. You mentioned Jamal Shead, Marcus Sasser's another one, even multiple names who have come in as freshmen and grown throughout the course of the program. But I do want to highlight, and I'm curious your take on this, the freshman guard who is there now. Kingston Flemings was a top 20 prospect in last year's class, but he has been one of the best freshman guards in the country. I will admit, I probably would have been a little skeptical a year ago as to whether or not he was on a one and done track. Right now, while it's early, he's got a lot of momentum with NBA scouts. And I'm wondering if his ascension being potentially faster than expected, if that changed the recruiting plans for Houston and kind of increased the demand, if you will, to bring in another lead guard.
1,000% it did. Now, there's still a lot to play out this basketball season, but the last thing that Houston wanted to be in was a position where they had to find 2 point guards in the spring to replace if Flemings goes pro. So they got one taken care of. Now you would imagine they likely look towards the transfer portal if Kingston does leave. And if he doesn't leave, they'll get themselves a great situation with 2 young athletic point guards.
Yeah, I think that was the caveat I wanted to make, and you alluded to it there. I don't think the expectation for Ikenna is that he comes in and takes over for Kingston. I think whether Kingston stays or whether they go into the portal, which we've seen them do on more than one occasion the last few years to fill that position, because Houston, let's face it, right now, the objective is to compete for a national championship year in and year out. It is the rare freshman point guard who's able to come in and start. And Kingston Flemings has the advantage of playing next to Milos Uzan as well. Uzan is out of eligibility. Emmanuel is out of eligibility. So you're talking about potentially a brand new backcourt in Houston next year. So am I correct in assuming that while this is an important commitment, they are still going to have to hit the portal hard this spring?
I think they're going to have to. Obviously, we'll see how things play out for Ikenna this year, and he certainly has plenty of areas where he can get better, and physically he's going to be ready to help out. But college basketball, you have to have depth at the guard position. So even if they think Ikenna is somebody that could potentially come in and play starter minutes, they need another guy, and ideally they'll want a guy with some experience to lighten the load on any incoming freshman.
All right, folks, you are not going to want to go anywhere. Ebos and I are going to come right back. We're going to be joined by Travis Branham, and we are going to talk a lot more recruiting, plenty of intel to get you. That's coming up next, right here on the CBS Sports Network. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network, where we are talking college basketball, NBA draft, and right now, college basketball recruiting, as I'm joined by my colleagues at 24/7 Sports, Eric Bossi and Travis Branham. Now, fellas, Ebos, let me pose this one to you. First of all, the early signing period is over. That wrapped up on Wednesday, but if previous years have taught us anything, it's that sometimes the news isn't over just yet. Can you walk everybody at home through why that is? If the early signing period is over, why is it possible that we still might be getting some breaking news here in the next day or two?
Yeah, we're in a different era where kids like to announce things a little bit differently. Some people like to drum up some publicity. Some people just aren't comfortable with releasing their decision just yet, but that doesn't mean that guys have not signed. We saw it last year with AJ DeBonsa in BYU. We saw it with Michael Brown in Louisville and some other guys. So just because we haven't seen every signing and every announcement yet doesn't mean that there aren't a few guys out there who may have signed in the past couple of days or during that week-long window who are just waiting for the right time and situation to announce where they're headed.
Well, Trav, you can probably guess where I am going here. As the master of intel, my question to you is, if there is a player we are looking at and wondering if we're going to see a release in the near future, who are you focused on?
Yeah, the top candidate in this category this year is Caden Samuels, a 6'6" wing that is one of the top scorers in the country. He's been down to two schools for the last few weeks in Georgetown and Alabama. And heading into the early signing period, I had already made a crystal ball prediction for Alabama and the Crimson Tide here. And it is very notable that they did lose a commitment in Christopher Washington this past week. And so I still believe that Alabama is firmly in the driver's seat here, and he is the top candidate for the guy that could have already signed and is just waiting to make that announcement public.
Now, I want to make sure that we kind of have the order of operations correct here, because I think if you're a fan at home and you're listening to that, it's easy to say okay, well, Chris Washington is out, so now Alabama's going to go get Samuels. And I actually think it probably played out just the opposite of that. I think Alabama prioritized Caden Samuels, although the information has not yet been publicized yet. As you said, you put that crystal ball in long before Chris Washington decommitted. I think Chris Washington might have seen the proverbial writing on the wall, so to speak, and understood that they were going to continue to add players. Am I correct? Let me say it this way. Do you view the order of operations the same way that I do?
Yes, I do. Like you said, they made him a top priority, and Georgetown has recently added their own top 25 wing in Alex Constanza. And so when that happens, the dominoes start to fall into place. Caden Samuels, the most logical destination becomes Alabama. And again, by my information, things sound to be essentially a lock for the Crimson Tide on this one. And that is exactly why I plugged in that crystal ball.
All right, so if Samuels does go to Alabama as expected, here's what the updated class rankings would look like coming out of the period. Now, again, the early signing period is in fact over, but as the information continues to trickle out, these class rankings will evolve. So if and when that happens, as expected, Caden Samuels ends up at Alabama, we're now looking at a situation where Michigan State would have the number one class in the country, followed by Kansas, Maryland, Purdue, Duke, Missouri, Texas, Oklahoma State, Florida State, and Pittsburgh. Now, fellas, those numbers or those rankings are based on a mathematical formula that doesn't necessarily consider fit. It also prioritizes quantity. The more recruits you have, the better off you're going to be in the class rankings. Schools that only have one or two commits, they're not going to kind of check that box, if you will, and so they won't be as high up. So my question to you is, aside from those numbers, which of these classes, or any class for that matter, is your favorite? Bossi, I will start with you. Who do you think did the best job in the early signing period?
I have to go with Buzz Williams here. What he's done in just 6 or 7 months at Maryland is really off the charts. Even prior to landing top 10 prospect Baba Oladuton earlier this week, he was really off to a great start. And if you want to go back to when he took the job back in May or April or whenever it was, he has now landed 2 of the top 5 recruits in Maryland history since the internet recruiting era started with Baba and Darius Adams, and 3 of the top 9 when you add Caden House this year. So he's really off to a great start. You know, Baba, obviously, he's 6'10", he's long, he's skilled, he does a lot of things. Caden House, I personally love. He's a little bit wild at times, but he is a guard who can go get it off the dribble, get downhill, make lots of things happen. Adama Tambadou is a classic Buzz Williams guy. He's a C-ball, go-get ball kind of forward. And then with Austin Brown, they've got a guy who can come in, knock down a shot from the perimeter, and be developed over time.
All right, Trav, it is your turn. Who do you think has done the best job outside the numbers in the early signing period?
Yeah, of course, I got to go with Duke here. As always, Jon Scheyer and this staff have already put together a strong class here. They have 3 commitments, beginning with the number 4 overall prospect in the country, and that is Cameron Williams, who announced last Friday. Behind him, you have number 12 overall, Bryson Howard. He was a guy that broke out this summer, going from an unranked player into this top 15 and rated as a 5-star recruit now over in our 24/7 sports rankings, a high-flying wing that can drill shots on the perimeter, get downhill and defend multiple positions. And then they went out and got a really impressive and promising developmental big man in Maxine Mayer. And what's unique about this new class is Jon Scheyer and this staff historically have always gone out and been very aggressive on the recruiting trail, landing 1 or 2 commitments heading into going into the summer and heading into the fall of these senior classes. However, this year that was not the case, and they had to fight off some serious competition, both with Bryson Howard and with Cam Williams, and they're not done yet.
All right, guys, the program that I want to talk about is Michigan State. They do have the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the country. And this is going to sound counterintuitive, but what I love most about the Spartans class is a combination of their depth. And here's the surprise part. I don't think anyone in this group is one and done. Now, again, I know that sounds counterintuitive because how could the class be the best in the country without any one and dones? To me, it's a class that's going to pay lasting dividends because players are going to return. And I could be wrong. Someone like Ethan Taylor, clearly he's got tools that could appeal to NBA scouts. There's going to be an immediate opportunity there. It's not out of the question that he's one and done. But I think Ethan Taylor is most likely a multi-year college player, the most physically dominant big in the class. Jisaiah Jervis has a strong college-ready body. He's a shot maker. You combine him with Carlos Medlock in the backcourt, who's a little undersized, but has just got a ton of game with the ball. And then you've got Julius Avent, someone whose dad played in the NBA, who again has a college-ready body. He's got long arms, and he can provide some floor spacing from the forward spot. All 4 of those players, given an opportunity to come in, I think can play immediate minutes as a freshman, but then they can all be retained and they can all continue to get better with each passing year. And in a time when college basketball is more about getting old and staying old than ever, Michigan State's going to have an opportunity to do that through player development and retention. And I think that is the secret sauce to why they may have the most meaningful recruiting class in the country. It's what the numbers say. And I think from my vantage point, I think the numbers are right at this point. I love where the Spartans are at. But I have a question. Trav, Kentucky. Obviously, Trotter and I are going to talk about them next segment, about what's going on between the lines. But outside the lines on the recruiting trail, this is a program that we were all expecting to have a couple of commitments at this point in time. I will just be frank and say we have been on the Tyron Stokes commitment watch since mid-October. Then we were on the Christian Collins commitment watch this week. Neither one of them have yet officially, at least announced, a commitment to Kentucky. So my question is, what's going on there?
Yeah, the recruiting, this whole recruiting cycle for Kentucky has been really interesting. They scheduled as many as 17 official visits from my tally, which is an absolutely incredibly high number, even in this own day and age. And like you said, yes, they've been considered the leaders, not only for Christian Collins and Tyron Stokes for much of the last few weeks, they were also considered the leaders for Caleb Holt. And now my information is that, and as I said last week on the show, things are now shifting away from Kentucky with Caleb Holt. So it sounds like they're going to be missing out on Holt. But as far as Christian Collins, I still think they're in a great position here. I still think they are very likely to land with his commitment. And we did anticipate that the information behind the scenes was there were plans for a commitment this past week. However, they have been delayed. I just do think that as this continues to progress and play out and conversations are had, I do think this one ultimately plays into Kentucky's favor. However, the Tyron Stokes one remains unpredictable. It's very challenging to get a gauge on where this direction is going to go. Kansas is very firmly in the mix. We've said that time and time again. You can't rule them out. Frankly, some of the information that we have is that Tyron thinks very highly of Kansas. And some people would say that he wants to end up at Kansas. However, there's a big hurdle here with the Nike shoe deal and getting over the hump with Kansas being a premier Adidas school. So where does this Kentucky recruiting class go? I think it starts with Christian Collins, but where does it end? I don't know.
All right. Well, we are going to be following that closely. Travis, of course, eBoss, you can find their work at 247sports.com. Kentucky fans, don't go anywhere. We're going to talk more about what's going on at the next segment when Isaac Trotter joins the program to break down whether schools have spent their money wisely. That's coming up next right here on the CBS Sports Network. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network, where now I am joined by Isaac Trotter. If you were just watching our last segment, we were talking about the challenges Kentucky is facing on the recruiting trail, which are not necessarily as well documented as the challenges they are facing on the court. The Wildcats are currently 3-2. They had a disappointing loss, shall we say, at the Championship Classic. And if you watch the Iron College Basketball podcast, you heard Matt Norlander. He was poetic about the challenges that Coach Pope has in his club are facing right now. We're not going to regurgitate any of that, but Trotter, going to ask you to do what you do best and kind of peel back that onion and break down, like, what is the problem for Kentucky beyond the fact that Jalen Lowe and Jaden Quaintance are not in the lineup, which is, let me just say, not insignificant. But beyond that, what is the issue right now?
I think it really starts with just attitude and effort. I think that there's been a lack of disconnect in that regard and a bunch of defensive scouting report mistakes. Like when I was watching Louisville, they're missing easy things that they're supposed to do against Ryan Conwell. They're missing easy assignments against Mikhail Brown Jr. They're missing easy assignments against Isaac McNeely, like kind of day one stuff. Same type of deal against Michigan State. It's a lot of scouting report errors defensively for a group that I think could have been a top 10 unit this year defensively. Like even without those guys, like Denzel Aberdeen can really guard. Otega Owe is one of the best defenders in the SEC. Mo Diabate, they brought him from Alabama because he can really guard. And you know, I think like Mark Pope's kind of struggling because it feels like, how can I get this team to be connected when, you know, defensively we're making mistakes and it's compounded by an offense that's after me, you come first. It's like a bunch of guys just hunting their own shots in transition. You know, you don't have a rebounder underneath there to try to get a second chance opportunity. They're bad shots, and it's hurting your defense. And you know, they gave up 19 transition points to Michigan State. They had like 2 kills, which is like 3 stops in a row, like in the entire game. So it's a mess. And, you know, I think one thing that like we could look forward to is just simplifying this rotation. Like it's got to get kind of trimmed down, I think, a little bit. Colin Chandler, Denzel Aberdeen, Otega Owe, and Malachi Moreno, I think are their best 4 players right now. Those guys have played 14 minutes together, period, the entire season. I think moving forward, getting those 4 dudes on the floor together and kind of rocking with them a bit more could be one way to find some continuity because Kentucky's issues they're real on both ends of the floor right now.
All right, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. And listen, this comes without, as we said, Jaden Quaintance, who I have as a projected lottery candidate at this point in time, a dominant defensive player on the interior, and Jalen Lowe, who was an alpha type creator at Pittsburgh last year and had a chance to be a really important initiator this year at Kentucky. Quaintance hasn't played. Jalen Lowe's played in 2 games, and even at that, he had the big shoulder brace on. Beyond those 2 guys, they still have 10 players averaging at least 13 and a half minutes per game. So that is now 12 players in total who are being paid to come in and play rotation minutes. And my question is this, from a coaching perspective, the benefit of depth is supposed to be accountability. It's, hey, if you don't do what I'm asking you to do, then I've got somebody else here who can. So at what point do we get there? And to your previous point, like, you brought in guys specifically because they are supposed to be able to provide a defensive identity. Otega Owe and Mohamed Diabate are the two primary guys. Both of those guys are playing over 20 minutes per game. But it doesn't work. So let me ask you this. You talked about that core unit. If you were next to Mark Pope right now in that coaches meeting, what is your suggestion for what the rotation should look like both now and when you get your point guard and your big man back?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm really starting with making a switch at center. I think Malachi Moreno has earned the right to play more at the 5. I think his decision making has been terrific too. Playing through him is something that without my point guard, like, I got to be more set oriented. And I think playing through Moreno at the top of the key is a little like what they were able to do last year with Amari Williams. And early in the Michigan State game, you saw that they had some backdoor dimes. They were able to throw some lobs over the top of the defense against a Michigan State defense that really wants to play in the gap and is really pressuring at the point of attack. They got away from that. And so I think that's like the first change for me, is like getting Moreno it's kind of been like a 60-40, 55-45 split right now, where he's on the lower end of that. I would flip that immediately. I think he's a 23 to 25 minute per game guy at the start, and we're going to play through him a little bit more and go from there. Because if we can run more sets offensively and kind of get the shots we want more offensively, I think that can set up this defense to be, a little bit more structured and a little bit more sound. But effort and energy are things that also Kentucky has really struggled with. I don't know if that's all just like switching the personnel. Like, part of that is just like pride and showing up and being like, I'm not going to make scouting report mistakes that we talked about for, 2 hours before this game in the lead up to it. Once Kentucky gets to that stage, I think the rotation stuff will actually have a little bit more merit.
Yeah, to your point, Malachi Moreno playing 19 minutes per game, averaging 10.7 rebounds, 2 assists in that time. Conversely, Brandon Garrison, 21 minutes per game. So they're splitting that center position just between the two of them with Quaintance out. He is at 6 points and 5 rebounds. So the production is obviously there. You mentioned the lineup efficiency numbers as well. Rick Pitino, who Mark Pope's old college coach and obviously a former Kentucky head coach as well, he interjected this week on his former players' behalf and said a lot of the numbers in terms of NIL or rev share numbers associated with these players are misreported, and Kentucky didn't spend as much money as is being reported. But meanwhile, St. John's is 3-1. They've beaten the people they are supposed to beat. They had that loss in New York City to Alabama. I wanted to kind of get your temperature check on the Johnnies and where you are at with them in terms of, did they spend their money wisely, or does this look like not such a great investment 3 weeks into the season?
It's a nuanced discussion, because I was a bit lower on St. John's heading into this mix. I think I had them 12th in my preseason top 25, which is a smidge lower. Some people had them number 1, and I had them behind UConn too in the Big East. I watched them play against Alabama, and the defensive struggles early, I was kind of expecting. When Davon Smith leaves and Kadari Richmond leaves, like, those two dudes were amazing point of attack defenders that were just hounds. Like, you had one guy that could just turn a water off for basically 40 minutes that you could rotate. And now you kind of bring in Ian Jackson and Joe Sansan, and those guys are really talented offensively, but defensively there's a drop off. So I wasn't surprised that they struggled with Alabama, but I weirdly left that game feeling like this St. John's team is going to be a problem later. Like, they're so athletic, and I love the front line. Like, I think Zuby Ejiofor, Dylan Mitchell, Bryce Hopkins together. I know people are nervous about the 3-point shooting. I think it works. And so, like, there's some consternation about, oh, maybe St. John's isn't quite ready now. That's fine. I think in March, on a 40-minute type of game, like a do-or-die game, and you have 48 hours to prep for this athleticism and this size and this defensive flexibility that they have with those 3 big forwards on the floor at the same time, I think St. John's is going to be just fine. So have some patience early and then buy back on this team later. That's my strategy with St. John's.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Bryce Hopkins starting to figure it out. I think Dylan Mitchell was maybe the most underrated addition out of the transfer portal, just because everybody had kind of moved off him because he hadn't lived up to those early recruiting rankings. But his energy, his enthusiasm, coupled with his athleticism, he just was named a tri-captain this week. So I was not at all surprised to see that. I'll also say I'm just thankful that we've moved past and this is not a knock on Ian Jackson, who I've watched since he was a freshman in high school and I'm a big fan of. but he's not a point guard. And I'm glad we've gotten beyond that talking point of like, oh, he's here to play the point. Like that was just never going to be the case. Last team I want to ask you about, and again, similar context, is this money well spent or is this a bad investment? Talking about the teams that have reported to have spent the most on their roster this year. Michigan is 4-0, but could very easily be 2-2. What are your impressions of the Wolverines?
Yeah, a bit shaky so far to start. The turnovers have popped up. The shooting has been a concern, but it's kind of one of those things where I'm really in on them because I know what they're good at. And I think the rim protection, the defense, the transition offense, and the rebounding are four things that really translate. And Ade Mara, like a lot of love went to Yaxel Lindeborg and Morez Johnson this year. Ade Mara may have been their most impactful transfer addition. Get this stat. Right now, through 4 games, opponents are shooting 33% at the rim when Ade Mara is on the floor. Like, it's just a ludicrous number. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in my head. Like, he is one of the most productive per minute players. So there are some concerns with Michigan. I don't think they're automatically going to turn into a great shooting team, with the lineups that they play and the Elliot Cadeau at point guard. I don't think that the turnovers are fully going to get eradicated from their profile. But when you protect the rim at an elite level, when you rebound like this, when you can get out and run in transition, I think Michigan has a recipe that's going to work at a really high level. So yes, it's shaky now. I think Michigan is going to be really, really hard to play against for the next 2, 3, 4 months.
They're also playing some jumbo lineups. It's not that dissimilar from what we just talked about with St. John's. I saw Arizona live at UConn 2 nights ago. Same thing. The positional size, we're seeing some of the best teams in the country really almost sacrifice three-point shooting for size. And when you see Michigan, not just with Mara, but with Morez Johnson, with Yaxel Lundeborg, I mean, playing Yaxel Lundeborg at the 3 at times, they can just be massive. So the collective size along that front line can be really, really overwhelming. If they can just be adequate with ball security and three-point shooting, they are certainly going to be dangerous. And just give them credit. They're figuring it out while winning potentially games that they maybe shouldn't. They are undefeated and gradually putting the pieces together. Trotter and I are coming back after this break. We're going to talk about some of the best players and NBA prospects in college basketball that is coming up next right here on the CBS Sports Network. Welcome back into the CBS Sports Network, where we are talking college basketball recruiting, and now some NBA draft. Over at CBSSports.com, we are releasing the second volume of my big board for the NBA draft and expanding that list to 50 names. Similarly, on 24/7 Sports, you can find the Draftables, which is a team-by-team listing of every NBA prospect for this draft cycle currently playing college basketball. In total, it gives you a really deep look at this NBA draft cycle. Now, while we are exploring the draft in tremendous and unprecedented detail, I want to make this point, and I think it's a really important one. There's still 6 months before the draft, and I think at this stage, there are probably only 6 players that should feel really good about their draft stock come next June. Those 6 should not be a surprise. Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonta, and Cameron Boozer, they came into the college season with all the hype. And while DP has had some injuries, I think for the most part, those 3 have lived up to expectations. Similarly, Caleb Wilson has been awesome, better than expected. Nate Amen and Mikel Brown have also been very, very good and shown that same upside that people were excited about. While there is still a lot of time and things can change, those are the 6 prospects that I feel very good, if they continue to trend along the same lines, are trending towards the lottery in June. After that, everybody else, it's kind of wait and see. So, Trotter, I wanted to get your thoughts. I know Caleb Wilson has really moved the needle for you. And one question I've gotten asked, including by E-Boss, Eric Bossi, who says to me, he thinks Caleb Wilson is in the top 3. Where are you with that right now?
I'm not quite to the top 3 levels yet, but I think he's 4th. I think he has certainly surpassed Nate Ament, I think, in that race for 4th. And it's mostly just because I feel like he makes every team that he would play on better. With the activity level, with his diligence defensively, the speed and athleticism that he's at, his power, his bend, like all of it has just popped. The one thing I notice about Caleb Wilson that I've seen this year, it's like he's a star player who plays like a role player and with just the mentality of a role player. And I love that mentality. I think I think he has certainly shown enough early. Now he's got to continue to prove if he can actually score, right? But we've been pleasantly surprised with some of his mid-post backdowns, those little followaways that he's added to his game. But I think he's so far shown early that he is an unbelievable culture guy as well. Like, and I kind of like betting on those type of players that like just they're dogs. Like they just want to improve and get better every day, and they make their environment better, and they're kind of raising the imprint on winning for everybody on that roster. He has been one of my favorite players to watch so far this year, and I have a hard time seeing, like, if I was number 4, I'd have a hard time not picking him with just the impact on winning on both ends.
Yeah, I can't disagree. He's been great. I'm interested to see how the offense holds up and the degree to which we think the offense that he's showing at North Carolina is translatable to an NBA setting, which is mid-range averse, right? So that is something that I'm really interested in. But the athleticism, the elasticity at his size, the defensive versatility, that's all tailor-made for the NBA. Beyond those 6, Trotter, I've tiered this, and I've got a second tier that I'm calling lottery potential. And I want to get your take on these guys because it's a batch system, which is very similar to what I think most NBA front offices are doing before the first of the year. In this lottery potential category, I've got guys like Darius Acuff, Jaden Quaintance, who hasn't played yet, Chris Senak at Houston, Bennett Sturts, Koa Pete, who I got to see live 2 nights ago, Dash Daniels, Isaiah Evans, Thomas Hoke, Kingston Flemings, who we talked about earlier, Laxel Lundeborg, who we talked about, Dame Sarr at Duke, Braylon Mullins has been out at UConn. We haven't seen him yet. LeBaron Filan, he's been awesome. Nicholas Avdalis at Virginia Tech, and Tunde Yesufu. And this list is continuing to evolve, but these are my guys that I think have a chance to play their way into the lottery and join those first 6. I want to ask you about Thomas Hoke because I've talked a lot about him and how everything has gone perfectly. I know you have strong feelings about him as well. So what is your take on the Florida? Do we call him a forward? Do we call him a wing? I mean, the reality is he's playing both and he's playing a lot of 3. But what's your take on the Florida Gator?
He's an ultimate winner. And I think the thing this year that I've really been impressed with is like the expanded part of his game is showing what I think he's going to be at the NBA. Like he was playing the 4 last year at Florida. He is not a 4 at the NBA. He is a 3. He is a wing. And I think this year we're starting to see that more. His pick and roll reps usage has gone up. Florida trusts him to play with the ball in his hands more. He's taking and making more 3s this year. The stroke looks terrific coming out of his hands. And then you factor in the cutting, the IQ, the rebounding, his ability to guard multiple positions defensively. It's like that's what an NBA team is looking for. What an evaluation, too, by Florida. And then you factor in, to just like the player development down there as well. He is turning into the best version of himself. And, there's a lot to like about Thomas Hoke. And I just feel like in the lottery level range, a player like that who checks off X, Y, Z, all of these different boxes, it's really hard to pass that up.
All right. I got to see Koa Pete live just about 48 hours ago. Big win for Arizona on the road against a shorthanded UConn team in which Arizona just dominated the glass. Obviously, Terrace Reed wasn't in the game. Arizona wins the glass by about 20 boards. I was there, though, for NBA draft purposes, really got a good look at Koa, and it reinforced what we saw this summer. Obviously, I'd watched him throughout all 4 years of high school. What I saw this summer, though, with that USA Basketball World Cup team was someone who had continued to take his conditioning and, by extension, his athleticism to new levels. So he's got that football build, and we know he has football players in the family, but there is a level of cut and fitness and just endurance now that we did not see throughout most of his high school career. It had gotten better throughout the years, and it was at its best at the end of his year, just very linear in terms of the progression of his athleticism, but it's at an all-time best right now. He's still not shooting. So let's just not even shooting in warm-ups. I was going to try and grab like the slow motion look at a shot. Wouldn't do it. Just refuses to take a 3 even in warm-ups. That is going to be a major question. But his ability to put the ball on the floor, the ability to make passes off the dribble, that is there. What's going to be interesting is if Arizona's style of play, which is that same like double big smash mouth style, which is not very similar to the way the NBA is played right now, the context of that evaluation. So that's why I still have Koa, despite that 30-point opener against Florida. I've got him in the lottery potential group instead of lottery lock. We'll see what happens, but I will say that I thought that was right, even seeing him live the other day. Someone you saw live who I have moved up is LeBaron Filan at Alabama. Let me say this. I think there were 3 guards last year that came back to college basketball that in the pre-NIL era might have gone to the draft. LeBaron Filan, Boogie Flan, Tahad Pettiford. LeBaron Filan is the one who is helping himself the most. But what did you see having the opportunity to watch him live?
Stone cold killer. Like, just the ability off the bounce to get to his spots is just high level. I think he knows exactly what he wants to do, and he totally took over that game down the stretch against Illinois. He scored 9 points in a row, scored 12 points in a 4-ish minute span to basically close the game. Everybody knew in the entire building that the ball was going to LeBaron Filan, and he knew exactly, like, it was fine. Like, he knew exactly where he was trying to go. I think his burst and his wiggle is a little bit better this year than it was last year. I think that's something I noticed as well. I think he's made strides too as a shooter, like especially off the bounce. Like, he is really getting comfortable off the bounce with those pull-ups, stays under control, stays balanced, and does his thing. He's a baller. And again, he's also kind of like that gamer where it feels like big moments. He's just not afraid of the moment at all. And I love betting on prospects that had to play a small role last year and impact winning in that way, and then have a chance to be the dude again this year and kind of impact winning that way. That really gives me a lot of appeal if I was an NBA decision maker, that like, hey, we bring this guy in, he'll find a way to impact winning it, whether we ask him to be our fourth option or whether he's a second option that night.
All right. If you head on over to cbssports.com or 247sports.com, you will see that prospects are organized, and there's a number of players that are in this first round potential category, many more that will actually crack the top 30. But I wanted to talk about a couple that are among the best players in college basketball, because sometimes there's a disconnect. Let's call it the Zach Edey conversation about best player in college, but what kind of NBA prospect he is. Braden Smith, I think he's the best point guard in college basketball. I think he might, I think there's a strong case Purdue is as good of a team as there is in college basketball. What kind of NBA prospect is he? We're starting to see that trend in a more positive light, at least that dialogue. What's your take on where Braden Smith could fit in an NBA organization?
Yeah, well, he's not a star, and so you're kind of looking for specialists, right, to fill out your rotation. And Braden Smith's organization is a specialist. Like, he is going to organize your offense and get you a really good shot every single time down the floor. I think that's a skill that he possesses. And I think the wingspan is also another underrated aspect of his appeal as a prospect. He's 5'10", 5'11". I know they list him at 6 foot. I think the wingspan's probably closer to 6'4", 6'5". So I think that does give him a little bit more of appeal. We know that there's going to be issues defensively, but the jumper has improved year after year. He's got the pull-up in his bag. He's got probably the best shot fake in all of college basketball this year. That's another asset that he's going to have to use at the next level. I think he's probably a late first round type of candidate. And I think he could come into your team and just kind of like, again, he's kind of like Ryan Nembhard a little bit on steroids, where he just kind of organizes you, gets you into good looks, and can be that secondary guard. I don't have any aspirations of Braden Smith being a superstar at the next level. But again, he's kind of one of those players that I feel like it's okay to bet on, because like the development and how much he's gotten better year after year is really impressive.
I agree with you. I think there's a spot in the league. I think he's probably a backup point guard, but he's a culture carrier who gets you a good shot every time down. Don't go anywhere. We've got more coming up right after this on CBS Sports Network. All right, everybody. If you enjoyed that NBA draft talk, remember you can find lots more of it over on CBSSports.com right now. We've got an updated and expanded big board, and then at 247sports.com, the Draftables, which lists every NBA prospect playing college basketball, organizes it by team, so it's a little bit of a viewing guide. You can find that as well. If you missed any part of this show, check it back out in the college basketball YouTube page, as well as my friends Gary Parrish, Matt Norlander, and Rothstein. We'll see you again real soon.